Hello and welcome to this latest tutorial. This time we're going to do something called cinematic set design. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to have this scene here. Some of you might recognize it. It's the subway station that we did for the previous tutorial, the realistic set design. And basically we dropped a bomb and blew it up, and it looks crazy now. So while it's not required to have that to have seen that tutorial or even have the assets for that, because it's everything included here, it's a good companion piece, I think. So you'll see this time around we're not going to spend as much time in Blender. I mean, we're going to of course take care of all the geometry. We're going to take care of the lighting and everything and the camera in Blender. And we're going to focus this time though more on the overall mood, where to place our lights, playing with atmosphere, playing with cameras, rather than going through the meticulous process of building all these assets out. So that we have just a bit of a different workflow, different approach here. Then we're going to bring it into Photoshop and going to spend some more time in Photoshop, putting certain elements in here, bashing some photos in, adjusting the colors and everything. And we're also going to bring it into Lightroom to show you some different options for color grading. And I show you some of the finer controls that we have, that Lightroom has, that Photoshop does not. Okay, so let's get started. Before we start destroying our station, let's take a look at the actual thing before we destroy it. So some of you might not be familiar with what I did in my previous tutorial. So let's just have a quick look. So that's the station, how it looks right now. Just a quick refresher here. And you see there's all sorts of little things we can take care of. And we'll assume that something broke through the ceiling, and all these panels fall down. A lot of the pillars are going to be broken. The train is going to be somewhere lying across here. Basically what I want to do is opening the space up as if like a huge bomb went off on the surface, or I don't know, whatever happened, earthquake, I don't know. To give me some of these panels that kind of like fall down at an angle, and then we are able to see kind of outside, more in the distance. I don't necessarily want to look at everything that is above the station. Of course, it will to some degree come crushing down, but we want to take a bit of artistic license and get rid of a lot of that kind of stuff, and basically opening up the space to a certain degree. And then, I don't know, maybe we have one guy climbing out of it, just to give us a lot of angles and interesting cool pieces to work with, and overlapping shapes that we can place lights behind to create depth, to create mood. And of course, good designers that we are, we always start with actual reference from real life. So let's have a look. While I couldn't actually find any reference that was exactly spot on, because I guess there's not that many events like that happening, thank God. Let's see what else we can find. And oh, that is very small. So we have like sinkholes, like collapsed roads and construction sites. And while of course it's the opposite view, the view from the top down instead of the bottom up, I think it can give us a hint of what kind of stuff we need to place around the area, and what kind of elements we're going to most likely encounter to make our place believable. So here, that's some kind of collapsed tunnel with a lot of soil just coming through. So we'll have to deal with a fair amount of these kind of piles of rubble. I was mainly looking for collapsed tunnel systems, tunnels, also collapsed bridges. Those are also pretty interesting. The mix of like these kind of more like scaffolding, concrete, big concrete pieces, smaller ones to break off, I'm not sure I'm going to put any vehicles in it that will come crashing through. Would be cool, maybe. You guys can do that. This looks pretty serious here. That's also interesting. Not a collapsed tunnel, but one that's being built right now. Maybe that can give us ideas for the lighting. Here we have, collapsed bridge. Also pretty interesting to see how under this kind of duress that the steel actually, the metal actually deforms to a certain degree. And here we can also see the deformation of that. That's going to be an interesting detail to note. Here that's pretty well, I hesitate to say cool, because that is certainly not nice what happened here. But if you see these kind of structural bits of like the concrete on top, and then you have these like big metal C-beams, I think they're called, and how they're kind of wedged in there. And we will kind of need to get an idea of how this stuff roughly is put together, and what kind of indications we can give to make people believe that there's really a big piece of like there's big pieces of these materials that are piled up on top of our subway station all the way to the surface. And while we don't know exactly what's all in there might be like, I don't know, like shopping malls and whatever, like station malls on top of the actual platform or whatever, or just dirt or whatever. But we'll need to find a interesting visual mix of things to add to our scene in order to make it believable. Here, this one is pretty good. This is actually a subway tunnel that is partially collapsed. So we can see, like, you have lots of cables hanging here. These kind of pieces here, and then a whole pile of collapsed debris in the back. Whereas the other stuff is still fairly intact. So that's also interesting to note, because not only do we have to put a lot of destruction in there, but we also need to still keep it recognizable as a subway station to communicate that idea. So while we have to be a bit creative with our destructive urges, and let's see what else we have. It's also pretty interesting. Again, it's bridges, but I think a lot of the same materials will be used in there. Yeah, we can see really the deformation of these things, how they're like bending and twisting and turning. That's pretty cool. A poor truck. I hope nobody was in there. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of reference I looked for. Let's see if we have something else here. Something interesting. Yes, pipes we also have lying around for, I guess, like sewage and cabling and whatever else you need pipes for. And that could also be a good indicator of things we need to put in here. I think that's a different view from the same reference from before, with this really crazy bridge pillar which got demolished. Okay, so that is the usual reference we have. I also want to highlight something else which I recently found out about, and that is a website called ShotDeck. It's right now in closed beta. I think you can request for a sign up, and there shouldn't really be any issue why you shouldn't be able to get one. So it's a service for people in the entertainment industry who need to build art direction decks and all sorts of other stuff. And they need reference from other movies, basically still frames. And here's basically an interface which allows you to either browse the movies. Let's get a second to load. So you have tons and tons of movies here. You can search by that, or you can browse the actual shots. And then you have a filter here. You can also like here lighting type, HMI, LEDs, lots of cool stuff, aspect ratios, time period. You have so many different kinds of filters, even like lens, the kind of lens you can search for, shot type, aerial overhead. Like look at all this stuff. It's crazy. Establishing shots, and you can search for all of this kind of stuff. So let's say I really like this Blade Runner shot, and then you can get here you can get the big version. It's all 1920 by 800 or 1920 full HD pictures with really great quality. And you don't only get like the kind of random shots from some of these automated services, but you get actually the cool looking nice shots that you need and you want to reference. So while we have our reference for just what we're designing, we also want to collect reference for the kind of mood, the kind of cinematic flair that we want to achieve. And of course, if we talk about cinematic stuff, we need to reference cinema, and we need to reference good cinema. We don't want to reference shitty movies that look bad. So you can see here we have tons and tons and tons of stuff. It loads and loads and loads and loads and loads. And of course we can have a look at all these movies and just be inspired by whatever we accidentally find. This looks just fantastic in terms of color grading and everything. So we want to find good images based on the color grade, the lighting, the kind of shot used. And here you can actually see what has been used, which lens. I have no idea how they found that out. Frame size, lens size. So you have all this information, which really helps you to try to emulate that mood in our scene. We can play with those values and try to get the similar kind of results. And it helps us to understand what we need to have in the shot, like dark areas, bright areas, how dark, how bright, the kind of dynamic range and whatever they're using here. So that's all really cool. And we can also we can go, if you want to say we need something, some low cost contrast images here, maybe some backlighting. That's really cool stuff here from Vertigo even. So it's still very focused on American movies. You're not gonna find the edgy whatever indie movie from that nobody knows except you. So keep that in mind. But they're extending. They're bringing in more and more movies and more shots. I mean, right now they're at I think 150,000 shots or whatever. Blade Runner pops up again and again. That looks really good. So, and then once you have these, you can also mark them. You can add them here into a deck. So I have just my favorites, and I have the deck I made for this Patreon. So you can check everything. Let's say, we need to take these filters out. The exterior, interior, color. Let's see, color, cool. I want to do something dark and bluish. You can see here, you have it right away. And now the search is so much easier, and you know that everything you look for here is going to be of really high quality. So you don't have to spend time finding, the odd website or whatever screenshots you can find on Google. You have it all here laid out for you. So let's close this one and move on to, let's move on to the actual building. Oh, I can actually show you the images, of course, I collected. I should mention that. It takes a few seconds to load. So this is the kind of mood I want to achieve. It's kind of really dark with like some lights in the background. There's a lot of Fincher in there and a lot of Blade Runner, I guess. Some alien shots are also kind of there, although they're like a bit too purplish. Something from Shining as well. That kind of gets the mood across with like these like steely colors. Although I really like the kind of like warmer yellowish tones that are in these images from 7, and but we'll see what I settle on in the end. So yeah, let's get going. We are in Blender. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm showing the train station that I did last time in the last tutorial, realistic set design, and I thought it would be cool to take this station kind of apart and see how we can destroy this in a manner that somehow makes sense. Of course, you can do something completely from scratch as well, but that would take me here quite a while, and I think I can still illustrate the main ideas that go through my head when building such a scene by just taking this one apart. So this is pretty much exactly how we left off last time. That's what was included in the package for everybody to download, and let's see what we can do with this. So if you zoom out, yeah, this is kind of how it looks. The idea was that, I don't know, some big impact happened here and it kind of crushed down, and the main action will kind of take place here. So in the beginning, I just want to go through the main things that we can do to break this up. So there's a lot of duplicated objects that work with mirroring and arrays and all sorts of other modifiers, and I need to kind of get rid of those to be able to work on the individual pieces here, because if you just press tab to go into edit mode, there's really only that one pillar here that I can work with, because everything else will follow this pillar. Everything is just done with arrays and mirror. And so we need to usually go to the modifier and apply it for it to be turned into actual geometry for us to work with. So I just want to focus right now on the big pieces. I see that I kind of merged this into one, and it's also mirrored. So I probably want to apply that first. These two, there's no pieces in the middle, so I kind of have to take these and break them up individually. And I really don't want to be precious about this, because it's all going to be a huge mess and nobody cares about any proper geometry here. Let me duplicate that. I kind of want to have this kind of crash down here. And let's see where our camera is. Our camera is right here right now. Let me focus on this guy, because that will help me to figure out how to compose this shot and which elements I really need to take care of. Of course, if we do a variety of shots, then we will need to do a bit more work. But I think to at least have somewhat of an anchor point, to know to have kind of like a point, an anchor around which we can start building stuff, then we can at least get going. If we think like, oh, we need 5 shots or whatever, and then we can never decide what exactly we want to do. So I have this guy here, and I'll focus my camera on him, and now I can actually more directly influence better what we're looking at here. So we can see right now that we want to create depth. We want to keep some part of it open and see all the way to the back. Otherwise we'll feel too flat. I probably, for one shot, I keep the camera kind of in the middle and want to show the destruction everywhere here. So I have to imagine like what happens really when this whole thing comes crushing down, right? So the ceiling is made up of all these stripes of metal or whatever, and then we have these big pieces here. I mean, stripes of metal, I mean the kind of panels that go across here that are visible in the texture. This one I also need to apply. It's best to apply it from the top down for everything to work properly. So we have some panels hanging here from the ceiling. You can kind of imagine how this whole place would be falling apart. So like these guys, maybe just having them lie flat on the ground is not the most appealing way. Also, a good thing to get used to in Blender is that without having to like change the orientation of the camera all the time to be able to ideally access all the axes on the gizmo, it really pays off if you kind of familiarize yourself with the shortcuts. That really makes your life a lot easier. So grab to grab, G for grab on the keyboard, and then you can constrain it to like the Z axis by hitting X, Z, or X axis on X, or Y on the Y axis. And the same with rotating. So if you want to rotate it around the Z axis, you press R and then Z, and now it's constrained here. A lot of times that really helps, because you really do not need to pay attention to the gizmo. And when you hold Shift, you can make really minute adjustments to the object, because it slows down the rate of change. So, okay, we have these guys. There's some lights up here. Let's apply all the transformations again. So we can take these individually and like break them up. And here it's really about just having fun, just imagining how all this stuff could really break apart. We have these lights here floating around. Of course, most of these will be just gone. There's a ton of geometry which we just don't need, but that's okay. Oh no, what did I do now? Okay, I need to select these, grab Z, and then just throw it on the ground. And so what else can we do? Like there needs to be a certain amount of stuff I can just make up. So if I duplicate that with Shift D, like I think you shouldn't make up like large pieces of geometry like floating around somewhere, coming out of nowhere, or also like disappearing to nowhere. If you have, like, it would be weird if suddenly the ceiling is gone, but like the ceiling came crashing down, but then the ceiling is nowhere to be found. That would be really strange. So you need to make sure that you can at least account for most of the pieces that are floating around here. What is that? Okay. You can apply these or get rid of these, and then I'm not too concerned about what's happening here. It would be nice to have some props here. We have like a garbage bin. Be cool. What can we do with these guys? Let's apply the mirror effect. Okay. Let me stay with my camera here and then just change out of it with 0 numpad. Okay. Here we kind of need to do the same as before because it's just one large piece. So let's break these up a little bit. You see, I'm not precious about what kind of rotation angle they have, and it's just, I just want it to be a beautiful mess. Let me grab that one from the back, Shift D to copy, pressing 0 to check, so we can see we're getting some interesting angles here. And of course the ceiling is now open. Let's see what we want to do with the train. You can just take that guy and just just imagine, let's move the origin to the middle. Let's just imagine this guy just completely derailed. Just kind of sits in there completely overturned. You can even make this into like the main thing in your composition. I'm sure that would go rather well if you have the train model like well built. I want to delete that. Why is that not working? We grab this guy. Sorry for the rain outside. It's really heavily raining. This kind of doesn't move how I want it to move. Let's see where we are in space. Okay. Oh, it's only one side of the train. Well, it doesn't matter. So grab this. Delete the faces. Okay. Maybe it's a bit too prominent. I don't necessarily want to make this all about the train. At least for my demo here. Let's move this somehow in the background. It's cool that this guy is lying here. I want to make sure we can use some of the props we developed. This probably fell down. Let's see if we can demolish that somehow. It's not even visible. Grab it. If you grab it and hit Shift Z, that means you can move it on all axes except for Z axis. So that helps me move it just somewhere along here. So if you have this one, you hit grab and then Z, and then you just move it up and down. If you hit Shift Z, you can move it in X and Y axes. Okay, this one probably fell over as well. Definitely. We have a sign here, that's beautiful. I mean, there's probably a way that you can run a complete physics simulation and just have this all collapse in itself. That would probably be cool as well, but that maybe is something for another video. So we have our beautiful vending machine here. Let's see what we can do with that one. can place some of these things here nicely for us to see. We have these benches here. Let's see what we can do with those. There's a lot of benches. I want to focus on the main bench here. In our shot, we can like deform this because it's all metal. It's probably something fell on top of it, and let's use the proportional editing. We enable that here, and by using the scroll wheel, you can kind of affect pieces in a certain radius. We can kind of imagine it deformed, something fell on top. Just to stick kind of to the kind of way it would deform. Of course, it's not like supernatural or anything, but it, I think, gets the point across. Let's see, do we have these in the shot? Let me zoom out a little bit. It gives us a bit more geometry to play with. Let's see, we have one of these guys. Maybe like one of them could like hang down. Kind of, this could like kind of serve as a location marker. So with it like having written, oh no, what did I do? Okay, kind of having it written on there what station it is, and having it kind of in the frame, that would help to give us like an indication of where we are. What can we do with this one? Can we take these and, oh, I need to apply as well, mirror as well. So these pillars here, they still are a very good marker for distance. So I probably want to keep most of them, but we can definitely have some of them crushed. We can add some edge loops with Control R and scroll wheel up and down, and have some of these move around. Some of these have a few layers for some reason. I don't know why. I guess I messed up here. But we want to deform them. We have the proportional editing on. We can play around with these a little bit. Maybe delete some parts from it. And so we can deform these guys and have some fun. Another thing we need to take care of, well, this one is okay actually. Let's select a few faces here. Maybe this slightly came apart. We saw some of that deformation happening in the metal structures in the reference, so that is always a good thing to do. So this one this is all what we can do with, I think, with the existing pieces, and you can continue to build out however you feel like doing it. Now, for the other pieces, for what else we need to do is, we of course need to model the things that are not here. So we can do, for example, we need to make these ceiling panels thicker. We need to introduce some bends. Well, where did it go? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm still at the proportional editing. That's okay. Let's add some subdivisions and introduce some pieces here. So what you can do is, because we want to bring more panels in there, we want to bring in panels that are deformed. Things you can do to randomize this kind of stuff is, if you go to any mode, whether it is 1, 2, or 3 vertex, edge or face, you can always say select random, select random, and it will select a random number of these pieces, which you can then move around. You can also do things like select one of these guys and then go to proportional editing, go to the last one called random, and now you can move, it will move all the vertices or edges or faces in that you have that are in the radius that you control with your scroll wheel, and move them in random ways. Of course, only random ways in the way you select. So if I move it up and down, it will randomly move them up and down. If you just grab them, you can move them freely in every direction. It will randomly move all the other ones. It works mostly from this point onwards, and you might have to select a few more if you want to affect the entire structure. You can see how that is flapping about. So that's how we can bring a bit of randomization in there. It's going to be all very dark later on, so you shouldn't be too concerned about all this stuff in terms of perfect geometry. So let's see what else we can do. We can duplicate this again. With it selected, you press P to separate out the selection. Sorry if this maybe is too basic for a lot of you guys who are following me, but I thought I'd rather mention it for people who have not seen this before. So we have this piece here. Now we can turn on a modifier and let's say wireframe. And even before that, we can set a triangulate. Put that in here and you can see how it gives us a nice wireframe model. If we reset rotation and scale, just to be sure, we can make the thickness of the wireframe stronger. And that kind of gives us opportunities to like put like structural bits in here that will help us sell that there is a variety of pieces around. Let me duplicate it again and turn off the wireframe modifier. Because it's a modifier, it's non-destructive. So let me select a few faces, maybe most of them here on the top. Extrude them because we need some bigger and some smaller pieces, some thinner ones, some thicker ones. Let me add kind of a cut in here. I don't know if that will look good. So we have that kind of piece here. Maybe we can duplicate that, make it a bit wider. Always have to see how that looks. Now this guy is kind of lost, but let me see if I can bring him out a bit more so we can see some of it. Of course, we can always move it up. But that really comes down to your sensibility, what you like, how you feel this will look best. Now, one thing I wanted to also do is, let's see, I want to take these guys and extrude them a bit to the top because, I mean, imagine there's lots of different layers before we actually hit the surface, and we need to kind of find a way to emulate that. I mean, we're still working in a pretty closed system, but I need to still, I think, erect some walls around it so I have more control over the lighting and everything. So we'll just build up some structures here to the degree that it makes sense. Let's see, we can grab one more of these. Don't forget to turn off the proportional editing once in a while. Okay, this looks like a good mess in here. Thinking about other shots, like it would be cool to have like one on the train tracks. So you kind of have these tracks like leading into, I don't know, a pile of rubble. That could be very interesting. Can get a couple of more shots out of this scenery here, I'm sure. Maybe the opposite direction. If you focus on this guy here, of course, there's still everything is pretty much intact in the back here, but I think we can fight our way through that. So basically, what I'm trying to see here with this whole building here, I'm not just trying to randomly build stuff and cause destruction. I'm keeping very much in mind my composition, my scenery overall, and think about where I'm placing certain items. Get rid of these. I don't like these floating pieces here. Apply that. Take these down. I'm thinking about the depth here, how this can lead me into whatever I want to sell here. Maybe I have like, maybe the guy is standing a bit more in front. Let's throw this over. Or maybe we'll bring it more in front. So I'm thinking like, okay, here's my focal point, kind of the train. Maybe something is coming out of the train. Maybe you want to add a monster, I don't know. Or just our highlights are here. There's some light probably shining down on this area to give us a good contrast and a good focal point. There's going to be a couple of different lights that are going to be behind these pillars to give us depth, to highlight these pieces here of structure. We can highlight these a little bit. Extrude them out so we have like just some additional detail here, some additional deformed detail. You can select an entire edge loop by holding the Alt key and clicking on the edge loop. Then we press Ctrl B to bevel it, and then switch to faces mode by clicking 3, pressing Alt E, say extrude along normals, and we can extrude that. So this that gives additional opportunity for the light to be caught by these edges and give us nice reflections. We want to topple this guy over. So one thing which is a bit tricky and would either require a lot of time to build yourself or a small price to pay for things like debris piles. I highly recommend you buy some of them, like especially photo scanned ones. Those are really, really good. They hold up really well. And let's see where I have one. There are a few really cool ones. You can get one from Ian Hubert has one on his Patreon, which you can get, which is really cool. I can't include these here for obvious reasons, but they're well worth it. Ian's Patreon is worth it anyway for everything. So it's a pretty cool debris pile, and then that really helps you to beef up your scene with all sorts of cool detail that would otherwise be completely like very difficult to do. Of course, you can just bash it together in Photoshop, but it's really much better to just get this kind of stuff and get it done in 3D really a lot quicker, because you can just take this pile and then you move it somewhere else, you rotate it, you can move it up and down, you can scale it to watch for some repetition. I don't know how this garbage bin landed on top of it, or maybe we'll put it here, but it kind of did. So you can quickly populate your scene. You can see how quickly we can place these kind of things, and I always try to minimize using this kind of stuff as much as possible for the tutorials, because I feel like it's not nice to like start off a tutorial with like telling you that you need to buy X amount of plugins, X amount of assets, and all sorts of other stuff. But there are certain areas, and there are reasons why 3D can be a lot faster. And reusing, making, buying, reusing asset libraries is one of the huge benefits. And I think something that needs to be clear for everybody trying to get or wanting to use 3D excessively in their work. And there's a reason why ArcViz artists have huge libraries of all sorts of stuff that helps them in their daily work. And so like we have to have big reference libraries as designers, but increasingly as we move into 3D, we have to have growing asset libraries of stuff that will help us quickly put together cool images, and just like photo bashing, help us in areas that we're not necessarily directly being paid for. Like we're being paid for making cool images and imagining worlds. Like I feel like it's not our job to like draw the nicest debris pile. So if you can use it, if you have one, if you can buy one for a few bucks, then by all means, I highly recommend it. There's so many people selling these, or like scanning them themselves. And I mean, even if it looks choppy, that doesn't matter. It's just going to be as a base for Paintover or as a supporting thing in the background. It doesn't have to be. It's not a hero object, and it doesn't have to be. So you can see how quickly we can put this stuff together. I feel like we should leave a certain amount of stuff on the ground, free, like recognizable as our train station. I don't want to put debris everywhere, like completely crowd everything, because then it just becomes a generic pile of whatever. We won't be able to tell really what's going on anymore. So I just want to make sure that there's a certain amount of control that we still have. I feel like I want to do something with this pillar here. A good way to approach this kind of stuff or decisions in what to destroy, I think, is making sure you have a good mix of like surface destruction, but also silhouette destruction. So you see here that the destruction I'm doing here really changes the silhouette of the object that we have here. Whereas the destruction of this piece here, I mean, while I was bending it, it doesn't really do much in terms of the silhouette here. But here, this one, it has now this big gap here that wasn't there before. And I can paint in some other stuff, some guts that are spilling out of whatever structures inside that pillar to change it up. And you can also see here, because it's still very much intact, it will give the illusion that the station is still too intact and not that hard hit. Whereas if I really try to do something with this structure here and change the silhouette of it, then it will be more easily recognizable as something has happened, something severe has happened with this station, right? And since it's dark, we don't have that much possibility to do a lot with the surface. So we need to really focus on silhouettes and that kind of stuff to help us communicate our idea of a destroyed station. So this is working, I think, pretty well. Let's save our stuff. One thing we can also do is work with some Bezier curves to help us make like cables and wires that are sticking out here and there. So if you go in here, say Shift A Bezier curve, then I move into edit mode, just select everything with A and then get rid of all the vertices, and I click on this draw icon here. It will let me draw Bezier curves wherever I want. So it's good to do this like on the surface mode, because it will stick to whatever surface I draw on. So if you see like I'm drawing here, it will draw a curve alongside whatever surface geometry is here. If I go to this one here, the object data properties, and go to depth, and I just slide this up, I can make it thicker. If I hit Control, if I go into object mode, hit Alt A to deselect, I have this now this cable here on the ground. Very, very useful. And if I select it again, go into edit mode, I can just continue drawing. Of course, a lot of cables here on the ground probably wouldn't make that much sense. Maybe I want to make it a little less. I would just want to show a bit of chaos and destruction. So we can also say only first, and it should. Let me see how that works with the camera. It's always a bit tricky with drawing in the camera. I want to have some hanging cables off the ceiling. Yeah, that works. So it will only stick the first vertex, the starting point of the Bezier curve onto the surface of an object. So you have to be. Sometimes it does it like in crazy directions, but this one works. Let me see if I can. What if I want to draw like a hanging cable? Yeah. I have to be careful here. I have to try a few times. Let's go out. And so you see, you have some like nice hanging cables here now. They're not nice. I wouldn't call them nice, but it's going to be dark. It's going to be backlit, right? So we're going to see the silhouette of the cable, and it's going to give us a good starting point. And of course, you can make this a lot prettier than I'm doing it here, right? I'm just showing you some quick ways how you can add these kind of things to your scene, even in 3D, because the beauty is then that you can just copy and paste it, change some parameters, make it thicker, put it somewhere else, and you have some other random detail. Whether or not that makes sense there, I have no idea. That is totally up to you. But it can just be additional stuff in the background. If you give it a metal material, it might reflect something. That's cool. It helps to liven up your scene. Okay, so I think this is as far as I want to take the geometry part of this tutorial. And you can spend a lot more time on this, right? You can really, really beef it up. But this is the basic process that I used for this scene. So let's now jump into some materials and some lighting to really sell our scene. Okay, we move on to lighting and materials. So if you turn on Eevee, you can see that this looks slightly shitty. Of course, it still looks like the station before, with all the lights turned on. It kind of looks interesting, as if like the earthquake just happened, for example. But we wanna change it up a little bit. So let's first maybe turn the HDR way down. I also want to probably get rid of these lights here. I'll delete that, delete hierarchy. Get rid of those. I'll delete the things I don't need. I have actually a fog in here with a fog volume. I probably want to punch that up a bit, because now's the time for moody, foggy stuff. Okay, this is cool. This is getting somewhere. So I want to actually turn, I mean, all these lights here, they should actually be turned off. Because why would those lights work? Take the emission out of those. Shaders. Why is the emission here still on? Maybe it's a different material. Okay, weird. Okay, so we have those lights turned off now. It's still too bright. Maybe we want to turn the HDRI is still useful for reflections, but I think this one makes a whole lot more sense, even though you can't see much now. The train lights are still on, which is slightly disturbing with the people there. But let's turn the emission off. Okay, and now we have pretty much a completely dark scene. You can still see there's some... Okay, we get rid of that one. The sign, I'm sure, is going to be useful. Okay, things are chugging a little bit because of the screen recording. And of course all the textures in here. Let me see if there's anything else we can delete. Probably not for now. But now we need to get some sort of light in here. And we can start very simply with, sorry, it's chugging a lot, I don't know why. We can start simply with what did I press? Okay, not useful. Let's start with an area light to just get like a general light in here and see how that will interact with the fog and everything. So we have that here. Now we can switch into cycle, Eevee. Have I been saying cycles? Sorry, I meant Eevee. But we can't see much. And I really don't know why it's chugging a lot. Let's dial up the power. Okay, something is happening. That looks good. I want to make the all over mood kind of bluish, maybe a bit purple. Oh well, okay. Let's find some materials that are suitable. Here, of course, I have already a lot of materials that would help me with this stuff. And I guess you guys following along with this as well, or you destroy your own scenes, and please make use of whatever you already have, right? No need to like go crazy and do new things. We want to probably go into the ambient occlusion and dial up the distance a bit to have proper ambient occlusion, the dark areas between all the crevices here. We want to go to our area light and make sure we have contact shadows enabled. So this is already looking okay. Maybe I want to have the light maybe be a bit more subtle. It should just be a light that kind of like mysteriously bounces around, and it's just kind of like a fill light rather than the main light that should describe everything. Because for that, Like this is pretty okay. Like this is just a bit in the back. Look, maybe we want to take this guy, duplicate it, Shift D, and bring it in from the other side to kind of no, not like that. GZ, okay. Let's see what that does. Oh, way too much. It's a bit too thick. We can also, what we can do is, I just want to add a bit of bounce from the back. Maybe we can take our let's see if we have some control over the volumetrics. I want them to start a bit further away from the camera and not necessarily engulf our guy, so we can have it start a bit further back. Let me go to the second area light again and bump up maybe a bit more the power. Yeah, okay, now we're getting a nice highlight here. It kind of helps us separate the objects a bit better. So, and to push my accents, I want to add a spotlight and crank it up. Okay, cool. I crank it up mainly because of the visibility for now. I will make it more subtle. Now we have our shortcuts to move this light around and to really work with it. So we'll push it a bit back. You can see we want to probably make it, depending on what kind of light you want it to be, you can have it, bloody hell. You can have it to be harsher. You can really see the edge here, or you can blend it a bit more, and you have it really like a soft light that you don't really know anymore exactly like where is it exactly coming from. You want to rotate it, maybe move it to the side, move it a bit back. And we want to just use that light for us to highlight our main source, our main focal point here. We can make it a bit stronger. And I usually would use a variety of these to highlight all sorts of different things. Let's move it. You can move it here, move it down, rotate it, and you can place the source of it behind a pillar, or you can place the source of it behind outside of the frame. You can spread it a lot wider here, or you can make it a bit narrower. The main thing is to figure out ways how the light looks natural in the scene. So maybe it coming from there doesn't make much sense. So basically I want to pop the guy out from the background. Or maybe even like throw a light on him, so you have like a bit of a horror scenario here. That looks pretty cool. So you can also add one here. We'd probably add one there. Is that even the light? I think that's the wrong one. We rotate it in Y. We bring it down. Can make this a lot bigger. For the sake of this demonstration, we can have all of these coming from the same direction or just from the top. It takes a bit of fiddling around here. This is a pretty interesting light coming from the top. Maybe it's too strong. Oh, 20, no, 20 is not good. 200. Maybe it needs to be, it's a bit too warm somehow. I need to make it a bit more bluish. Maybe this one as well. And then what we can play with is the overall balance between, the balance between the fog strength and the strength of the lights. So if you want to have like a thicker fog, that's cool. But then at the same time, we need to really bump up our light source. Okay, maybe not that much. But now you can see that we can't really see our focal point anymore. So now that we have bumped up this light here, you see that the cone here is a lot more pronounced of the light, and we might not necessarily want that. So it depends on really what kind of scenario you like. Another thing we can do, and that is very interesting, is that we can add a box, a cube, and then we add a new material, and for that one we add an emission into the volume and make it kind of similar to the color we want, and we make it really low in strength, and then we push it back, and we kind of use it as a we can have it set in the distance, and so instead of the distance being dark, we need to bump it up now. Instead of the distance being like fairly dark, we can have the distance be a bit brighter in case there's a big light source in the back. I need to play with the placement. You can see how it looks like right now, and here's that big cube. But you see through the fog, there's not all that much left of it. Another thing, maybe the fog is too strong, and so we can play around with that. That was not what I wanted. Okay. So you see we have that in the distance. Another thing we can do, which is pretty cool, is if we can add a image as a plane. We want to go into the, let's say we want to add, let's add something like this. We don't want an alpha, we want an emission. Whoa, what happened here? So we have that one here. And we can actually, I mean, it doesn't make much sense right now, but Maybe the image is also not the best. We don't have to use it as is. We can use it stretched in whatever capacity you can pop something like this in. You can also pop different images in that might work well as the kind of image to give you some highlights. It could be also cool with images that are just a bit closer to the kind of shapes and color tones are that you're trying to achieve here, rather than just images of lights itself. So if you have like some moody shots of some moody photographs of this kind of, not a destroyed station of course, but something at night with like blue highlights and some edgier shapes, that I think would work pretty well for these kind of scenes. You can try play around a bit. It doesn't matter what it was before. But let's turn this guy off. It could be whatever it is, whatever you want to do in the background, and then you can later on like paint it out. You can bump up the fog a little bit again, so everything in the background is kind of coming a bit together better. Maybe I want to turn our main spotlight down a little bit. 10,000 is maybe a tad too much. But then again, what if we make it a bit smaller? Yeah, that's okay. So we can kind of see onto here. Let's see if we can. What if I plug the thing again into the emission here? No, that doesn't do anything. So here we can play with some of the. Let's assign maybe a different material. We have I think we have a concrete material already set up. It's a bit darker. Yeah, that looks good. So it's a bit darker overall, and it has it's like metal bits sticking out on top. That looks cool. And then from here on out, I have kind of like the mood established, and kind of have my bits and pieces that I like to have here. And now it really comes down to fleshing out the scenes with the camera angles that I want, and also addressing certain things that I think will be useful to address in 3D, like these kind of gaps in here that are not that nice because they have too much contrast here at the edges of the image. I want to kind of close these off. And really, so when we come back to the cinematic aspect of this, I think one of the main things here is that we kind of treat this as a movie set, whereas the previous scenario that we did in realistic set design was more like building the real thing and learning from that. I think in here it really comes down to learning about that. Just like on a movie set, you're trying to imitate and improve reality so it looks good in the frames that you're trying to create. So we're trying to kind of imagine what really would, like what would we see when we break down this kind of station, when we destroy it. And I think in that sense it helps if you have built a proper station and then taking it apart and kind of imagining how that will work. You're imagining the bits and pieces from the reference that you think would be there, and you build them out. But then let's not like get tempted by, again, rebuilding reality, but instead trying to distort and place our objects in a way that it would allow us to get cool looking frames, place these pieces in angles that look interesting, that give us a rhythm of light to dark to light to dark, to make an interesting image, to learn from the images that you have collected from Shot Deck or somewhere else, cinematic frames from movies, that help you understand what makes an image interesting and cinematic. And of course, that has not only to do with how you dress up your set, but of course also has to do with how you light your set. And in that sense, the main things to focus on is that you use the light to sculpt your environment, to help separate objects from each other, to help pop our main guy off the background, to use things like atmosphere to create distance and then light it accordingly with hiding these lights, just like in a movie set, above the ceiling, outside of the frame, behind other objects, to create these layers that then can really guide your viewer into the scene. So you see like how very quickly here we have established the depth with these pillars that are not only geometry but also lit properly, and then we have these patches of light that allow our eyes to kind of like jump around. We have this kind of as the focal point, and we have a light, of course, directly pointed at it. We have, coincidentally or not, this as kind of like a colorful spot with the green here, right? I mean, there can also be other things, right? That can be like brighter lights, that can be, I don't know, other people's silhouettes that we can focus on, and all sorts of stuff, right? And we need to take care that even though this works fairly well, we have other spots here, like this kind of spot here, this kind of spot here, with sharp edges and high contrast that are kind of destroying our attempt to guide the eye here. And look at this first and look at this guy maybe second, right? So we need to make sure that we add some blockers here and here to get these spots out of there, and to really have 100% control over and take control over what we're trying to build. So once we have frames that we're happy with, the usual thing, of course, we do on a technical side to get these out is that we hit F12, we render this out in the resolution that we have specified in our settings. So let's give this a short second just to go through it again for people who might have missed how to do it. And even Eevee takes a second to render this out. Okay, cool. We have this. We save it as an image. We also can go here into the layer and say depth. No, that doesn't work. We'll do that in a second. Sorry about that. So we'll save this one out. We want to save our ID pass. We go into the regular viewport again, click the arrow, click flat, random, get rid of the outline, get rid of overlays, and say view viewport render image. Save this image out as our ID pass to be able to easily select objects. We then revert back to our regular view. Here in the settings, you can set the resolution that you want to have. And what I did for this scene as well is that not only did I use Eevee, I also used cycles on top of that. With cycles, I have the option to add mist and to add denoising data, which is something you definitely want to do for these moody scenes with lots of volumetrics in it. So once we have that, we want to go into the compositor. If this doesn't show up, click use nodes. We search for the denoise function, add the noisy image into the image, denoising normal into the normal, denoising albedo into the albedo, and bring that into our composite node. Okay, let's go back to our layout. We have that, and then usually I would start a render. That will take a second here. So here it is. The image rendered in cycles looks pretty good actually. I had to bump down the density for the volume, for the fog volume, to get it a bit lighter. With the same settings as in Eevee, it was just too dark. So it looks pretty good as well. I want to save that as well, so I'll do that. Please note that it's here on composite, which means it has gone through the compositor as well, and it has been denoised. I can click here and say view layer to see the noisy image. So you can see that's how it looked before. And actually the denoiser did a very good job with cleaning up this image. So that's good. I'm going to save that noisy image out as well for me. I also go into here combined. It says I click on mist, so I get the Z depth pass. I save that out as well. That's pretty much all I need for this. Sometimes the grain pass the noisy pass can be quite nice because it introduces a bit of graininess. We can also add that later in post-production, but sometimes you get some nice artifacts that you otherwise would not get. So I have this image here now. I can save that out. And I can also go through the entire process of saving out all the other files. And then the next thing that we're going to do is composite this together in Photoshop. I'm going to, of course, show the version I prepared before, where I spent a lot more time on building out the environment with different shots, but the process was exactly 100% the same. The only difference is, of course, the time spent on it and the care of placing all the objects, etc., which you also should do. Okay, let's go to Photoshop. Okay, we're in Photoshop now. I prepared a little bit. I brought also some of the passes in that we saved out. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how what I did with these photos in Photoshop, with these images in Photoshop. So first up is here the render out of Eevee. So this is how it looks, very dark. There's a lot of things missing, a lot of things just don't look very pretty. As the next one, I brought in the noisy image from Cycles. And if we bump this up to 100, you see how it looks like. There's a lot of noise in here. And the front, though, is the front part of the image is pretty good, though. It has a different feel to the very clean image from Eevee. So I want to see if I can kind of build a hybrid out of it. So I just set the transparency to 20%. And so if I overlay that, I feel like I'm getting a bit more nicer atmosphere in here without all that noise in the background. So, and then I also have the denoised image, which it didn't do that fantastic of a job, to be honest, with the cleanup in the background. The foreground is good, but in the background here, it kind of the algorithm kind of failed, but that's okay. I'll set it also to 20%. So if we see how it was before with just Eevee and then these two layers on top, we can see we get a bit more separation. We get a bit more interesting things here. Of course, at the same time, I saved out I brought in the ID pass, and I did a quick levels adjustment on it to get the colors more easily selectable in Photoshop. And then I brought in the Z pass. Let me see how it looks like. So this is how it looks like when I just purely bring it in. Actually, I might already have made an adjustment on it, but yeah, I already made it slightly blue. So it's white in the beginning, but once you go to hue saturation, you colorize it, you can change it to blue. You have to amp up the saturation a bit and go down with the lightness, and then you are able to add a color to it. So I just want to emphasize the color that is already there. I don't want to change the color or anything. I just want to emphasize it. So I set the Z pass to lighten and 20% depending on how much depth I want to have and how thick it is in the background. So 20% is fine. Sometimes 10 is better. So I have a bit more separation into the Z depth. Now I did like a really quick Lightroom pass. I will show you in a bit how I did the Lightroom pass. I just basically did a color adjustment. And what I also did is, I mean, you can do that very easily by basically selecting all of these and then pressing Command-Alt-E, which merges everything on top. And then I can make some quick adjustments because it's a bit dark. So I just, basically that's what I did with the Lightroom thing, but I'll get into Lightroom later, so don't worry about it. So as the next thing I wanted to show you is we need to, so basically from the reference we had, what I noticed a lot is that the images are overall fairly dark. But there's two things that I want to really add and emulate, which is, for once, there's a strong light source in the focal point area, right? This one is quite bright already, but we need some like hot light sources that give us something to focus on and really blow out the highlights here to add a bit of realism. And on the other hand, we need to have, and we should have some little details, some areas in this image where there are not only these large chunks of very non-reflective materials, but also little areas that where little highlights, where little metal or reflective bits are really giving us bright highlights and strong reflections. So what I mean by that is stuff like, sorry, I have to find it. Stuff like this. You can see here on the right, like this one. This one really gives us additional detail, additional fidelity, an added thing of realism. It's not always the easiest to get these kind of things done in Blender, or in any 3D package. So I have to add them in Photoshop later. So the way I do those, I also added some different ones. So the way you can do these is, I have some images that I found with they look like this kind of stuff, metal bits. Like I just search for like scrap metal and this kind of stuff. So once we bring these in here, what I usually do is I switch the mode to screen, and then I really make them very contrasty and very dark, so that only the shiny parts kind of stay and the rest kind of disappears, the dark parts. And I take out the saturation a lot, maybe make them a bit more greenish to fit into our scene. I might make them even darker. Together with that, we can also work with our layer blending mode. I'm sure you all know how this works. Like Alt, you can split these apart. So basically this means that whatever is brighter in the underlying image stack will be able to shine through. There's not many bright things, so I need to find this point here where these areas kind of bleed through. And then I also go in with the eraser, soft eraser, and get rid of some of the parts, because I don't necessarily want this to look like an engine block, because that wouldn't make much sense. So that's how I can get some of these reflective bits in there, or a different image. I have it on the second screen here. I'll drop it in once I find it, if I can find it. Stuff like this. Don't use copyrighted images, okay? I'm just doing it for the sake of for showing it. So if you set it to the screen and really take the brightness down, I get rid of most of it. I just need some highlights here and there. It's also a bit too bright, a bit too saturated, so I take that out. So I just wanted like to have this hint of what could be there. It doesn't need to be, and with these like debris piles, it doesn't really need to be defined at all. But it just gives that added piece of realism that you would find in a photograph. So you have these, and you can also, I don't know, duplicate them. Kind of follow along, like don't put them randomly. They follow along the already established structures, so that once we align these actually make somewhat sense in terms of like, oh, this could be like structural bits, even though it's just like a really small piece from a garbage pile, and I don't know, it's like a window frame or whatever it is, right? So that's how I bring in these, and then I'll bring them into various areas with varying opacities, because you just need to hint at it, right? Like this one is completely like, I don't know what it could be. I don't know if this is how it really looks like, right? But we need to find an indication of that. It's probably a bit too strong, so we can just hint at it, and that's good enough. Of course, you can be more careful with this kind of stuff and spend more time on it, right, rather than really quickly here. So one other thing is that, as you can see here, these kind of bits up here, they're supposed to be random and destroyed or whatever, but they look a bit too clean. So I usually take like a hard brush and just try to add some extra bits in here to make it look more random or destroyed. And again, we just need to follow along the already established pieces in terms of perspective and structure. And you do whatever like looks nice compositionally, because the idea is there and everything. So we don't need to add much more to that. And you can make it as detailed or as detailed as you want. Just make sure that it doesn't look too distracting. It's not like too big, so it doesn't detract from the focus point, and it's just kind of there to support the idea of what this is, right? You can also bring in like some, I don't know, masked photos of bits and pieces that you can buy on Photobash. You probably want to paint this guy out, because that's not supposed to be here. That doesn't look nice. It's distracting. We can also do things like, if I go on this merged layer here to get rid of this grainy structure here, I can use like what is it called? The smudge tool. Yeah, the smudge tool is like a finger here, and just ever so slightly wiggle to just get that background a bit smooth out. You probably want to select this guy and have him not be affected by this, or even bring him on a separate layer. But so it's just not distracting. Another thing, like I mentioned before, is we want to bring in some lights. That's a different layer I've already prepared. Doesn't matter. So one thing you want to do is bring in some lights. Now you can do that either via like adding, well, just simply photos of lights, right? So if you have like a photo of a light, you can set it to screen again. Make this dark, and then here you have like this. We need to paint that other stuff out. Oh, I'm still on the smudge tool. Well, that's not very useful. Eraser, please. Okay. Photoshop is acting up a lot. Great. Excuse me. No, I actually can't find the eraser. This is weird. I usually use the shortcut. What does the eraser even look like? Oh, it's there already. Okay. Now it works. So if I get rid of most of that, I have like this blooming and some lights here. Might be a bit too strong. Can always dial it down a bit. So you can either add these kind of lights with photo material, or you can do like a color dodge layer like this, and then really subtly with a soft brush, I usually do that. And white, you can add a few more. If it's too bright, then you take it down to like 30% and dot a few times, and then you can add a bit of a blooming effect here. So usually what I do is I add like a screen layer, and then with a gradient, the radial gradient tool, I go in and pick a color from the background and just add a bit of a blooming coming out of the lighter areas to soften up and make it a bit more gelling together, the entire image. And you probably also want to, okay, I added more of these. You probably also want to now go into the mask, into the ID pass, and now we can actually select some of these guys here. Probably want to turn this on. And now I can go and select these and can do things like I can invert it. With Control H, you can hide the selection. I usually do that because it's just kind of distracting. I want to add these to it. Okay, and then I can, let's say I do another screen layer, inverted gradient, and then I can separate these. So one of the things that we addressed a lot of the cinematic tools already, and of course one of the important ones in image making and is that we work on readability, that we are able to control the light in a way that it gives attention to what the viewer is supposed to look at. And one way we can push that in Photoshop is by doing these kind of things. We're selecting these items here and add just a bit of fogging behind it to separate it out, to make the viewer understand in an instant what they're looking at and in what space they are. Because imagine this is just a film still, and this will be there for like a second. So the viewer needs to understand right away what they're looking at. So this way I can kind of establish a list of priorities, a list of like a hierarchy of things that I want them to focus on, right? So the bright light here is what people will look at first, and I don't know what that could be, right? It's totally up to you. It could be, I don't know, an alien, a robot. It could be a search party with like flashlights. It could be whatever, right? That's totally up to your story. And of course, the character is something that the human eye is automatically drawn to, that you automatically focus on. So we can use that in terms of our bag of tricks, in terms of compositional tools, that, okay, I want my person to stay here because I want people to look here. The other thing is what you have to be very careful with are letters and writing. So anything, like, people also look automatically to any kind of writing. That's just how we're conditioned since the day we're learning to read. And you have to be very careful with these kind of things. So if you put like super sharp big letters on there, they're gonna, in most cases, overpower everything. So you need to be very subtle with these kind of editions of text, of posters where there's big writing on it, even if it's in a different language that you can't read, but you still automatically look at it because it's sharp, because it's crisp, it looks like order, and I don't know, people love order and everything. So if you have that in your scene, make sure it's like kind of out of the way and not high in contrast or broken up, so that it fits a bit better into the overall scene. And other things I usually do is, if I would go and like select a certain piece of the image that I think could use some highlights, a bit of a punch. So I copy the entire stack and with Control-Shift-C, and then do a levels adjustment. Of course, this is a bit too much. I want to pump up some of the detail and the highlights in there. So it looks a bit harsh, but I'm going to take my eraser and the saturation down to just kind of make it fit in there again. You see before and after, it's subtle, but we get a bit of a better idea of the structure of the ground, because we want to still communicate that this is a train station. So if we can hint at a bit of a tiled floor here, that would be great. Other areas that I want to maybe punch up are these kind of, let's try to select this group here of stones, Control-Shift-Z, and then I have the stones selected. And I can bump these up a little bit, just so a certain edge is a bit more readable. I want to get rid of most of this. I can force a bit more contrast in a certain area. I probably want to, either through vignetting later on or with a multiply layer and selecting black, I want to kind of get rid of the attention that this rock is getting here. Because again, I want everything to be focused here. If I have high contrasting elements at the edge, that's gonna not help in my composition. So I brought a bit more, if you can see, I brought a bit more contrast into this rock, so we can define the edge a bit better and see what's going on here. I can also do things like localized areas, punch up the highlights a bit more. So if I, let's say, maybe let's use white. I also use the gradient tool for that, with a very low opacity. can say like, okay, I want to have a bit of a reflectiveness here in that piece of the ground. Just as kind of like another little beat for like people to focus on. Is like, okay, this area you can see here, that's a lot of the, I don't know, tertiary detail to focus on and describe the scene. So you usually keep on noodling around on this kind of stuff a bit further. You see, like I added a lot of pieces here. Here I added another layer of like a multiply layer. I selected again this big piece here, and with the black color gradient tool, and let's hide that layer with Control H. And I just like subtly like make sure that this reads well, this pillar. And then I add like some like structural bits just with like the same way I've done here with the brush. See what else here, that highlight here, highlight on the ground, that highlight on here, on the stones, a bit of more blooming, a bit more separation here. So everything that I showed you. And then now what I did, now that the image is kind of at a point where I'm like, I'm quite happy with it, I want to actually bring it into Lightroom. And for more color grading, for additional filters, photo filters that allow me to push this image a bit more. I mean, it's cool right now, but I want to see what else I can do and how Lightroom can actually help me in different ways achieve a different kind of, or like push the mood a bit more. So yeah, let's jump over to Lightroom. So something which I've been using lately is Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom. It's something I've been, of course, using for my photos that I've been uploading a lot, in case you noticed. And I've been using it for a while, but never really thought about using it for other images I do. But I thought, why not try? Because Lightroom has a lot of really cool tools that can be helpful, of course, for photos, and then, of course, also for the images we do, in terms of color grading, in terms of some of the other more detailed settings that Lightroom has and that Photoshop does not. You will see in a second. So maybe a lot of you have never opened Lightroom before, and not really necessary. I think with most Photoshop, if you have like a subscription with Adobe for Photoshop, I think they throw in Lightroom anyway. So I think most of you should have Lightroom available to use right away. Now, there are two different versions of Lightroom. There's Lightroom that's just called Lightroom, I think, which is actually the newer version, but it's completely cloud-based. And if you don't want to do that, and if you just want to work with photos that you have on your hard drive, just like I do, I use Adobe Lightroom Classic. So that's the one I have installed here, just in case you are confused with the two versions. And I think Lightroom has a slightly different interface. So it's not a complete Lightroom tutorial by any means. But if you, I think, open it for the first time, you will be asked to set a catalog, a library location, and you can put that wherever you want. But then you're basically going to be in the library view. And there's a couple of other ones, but we actually only look at library, and we're looking at develop. So I have a couple of folders and collections here already set up, which you do not need to concern yourself with. We're only going to use a very small subset of features for this really quick overview. So what I've done before I import any photos is go to collections here and added a new collection. So you can just create collection, you give it a name, and that's it. So I've here the Patreon collection, which currently has no photos in here. the next thing I want to do is actually import some photos. So you can go to File, Import Photos and Video, or you can hit Shift Command I or Shift Control I guess, on a PC. So let's do that. You can navigate to the location of your photos, or you can just click on here, and then if you've done it already before, you can go to the recent locations. So I have that here. Here, of course, I already saved everything out. I only want to select the photos that I need to grade, so I'll uncheck all, and then I need to see which ones are the ones that I have saved out of Photoshop. So yeah, you need to see which images. I've saved basically a flat file out of Photoshop that then I'll bring into a grade here. So I have these, and then what I want to do here on the right side is say add to collection. Select the collection that you want to add it to. In this case, I call it whatever, Patreon. You can choose these or not. I leave this off and don't import suspected duplicates. You can do that. If you want to import them regardless, if you have already imported them somewhere else, then that's fine. So I have selected my photos that I've done before. So I'll click on import. That will take a second. Now, for the best quality, you probably want to export like a flat PSD or maybe a TIFF file. You can also import JPEGs, but of course through the continuous grading and pushing and pulling of data, it might degrade over time. And I think I've just used a JPEG, so you'll probably see at some point some artifacts. So now we're here in the library. We'll go here. I go into my collection. Now I can preview these by hitting spacebar. You can see these are the ones I have imported and from my Photoshop files. With Escape, you can go out. Now we need to move to the Develop section. And you can see down here you have the photos. You can, you can make it larger if you want, so you can see which ones you're using. And now on the right side here, you see a variety of controls. Actually quite a lot, and you see you have these here, these open up. And you have a ton of different things you can do here. Of course, if you have actually taken pictures, then there will be controls that are specific to the stuff found in the metadata of your photo, such as lens information, camera information, and then with lens corrections, you can actually, based on the profile of what they find in the metadata, you can correct the lens artifacts or vignetting, distortion, all these kind of things. But we actually just want to emulate certain things. So I have usually use a couple of these features here. So while the image here is quite nice, I feel like it's a bit soft and a bit murky. Some details and some things are getting lost. Now what you want to do is on a different screen, I have the color reference, the reference of the shots that we collected from Shot Deck, to just kind of get an idea of what kind of areas are popping, what is the overall color space, what is the distribution of values. These kind of things we want to improve if we haven't hit them already. So a couple of things that I like to play with. I don't usually play with all of them, but just a variety. So on the one hand, you can choose the color temperature here. That's usually like a kind of like a white balance counter measure. If you were slightly off with the white balance in your shot, then either in your photograph, then often it looks too warm or too cool. So you can use that to either make your image warmer overall or cooler overall. which can have very cool effects. We can also just Control Z and get back to the original setting. We also have a tint, so you can see how we can go very green or very purple. That can be very useful to make overall adjustments to the image. Now, if your image is too dark, you can see you can push up the exposure. And of course, at some point, it will just completely fall apart. But that's okay. So usually I make very slight adjustments here. Again, this is the overall control of how dark an image is. You can up the contrast, and then here you have a couple of settings for highlights, shadows, whites and blacks in particular. So if you want to bump up your highlights, you want to blow them out a little bit, you can do that here. I would not recommend to push these sliders to the extreme. This is not really meant for like massive adjustments. This is meant for subtlety, to push certain areas more or less. Here we have the shadows, so we can make the shadows darker. You see, it's a very subtle effect, or you can make the shadows brighter. So, I mean, this is basically something like the levels or curves adjustment, you know, from Photoshop. It's just a way more fine-grained control that you have here. You can go back to 0. You can see if you just want to bump up the dark areas, then you can do that here. You can see how the whites and the highlights have a different effect. So if I bump this up, it doesn't blow the lights out necessarily. It brightens the overall highlight areas. But whereas this one is really blowing out the highlights right away, which can be a cool, realistic effect. So I usually use a combination of those. There's no magic settings that I will tell you like, okay, you have, this is like +5, this is +10, -5, and then magically your image is going to look better. It all depends on what you already have here. And you need to play around and follow the reference that you have selected for yourself to emulate a certain look. That's the best way to learn this. It doesn't make much sense to just play around with these and then just go with whatever you think looks good. You need to develop an eye first for what makes sense. Like take a couple of photographs, take shots from movies that you want to emulate, and try as much as possible to do that. So now here there's a thing called presence, which is very, very cool and can be very quickly overused. So there's a texture slider, and then you see, I hope you can see that it does something with the contrast, but it gives it more, like it says texture, it gives it a bit more clarity, even though you have another clarity slider here. And you can see here how we can bump that up, and it really gives the image much more, it bumps the micro contrasts here, whatever you want to call it, and gives it more like of a clear feeling. It feels sharper. It's some kind of sharpening control for sure, but it gives it with a very fine control. You can get more grittiness into it. You can emphasize the grittiness in your images. Again, we have to be very careful, just like with the sharpening filter, that you don't do it too much. And now the dehaze features is great in case you have, I don't know, a lot of atmosphere in your image, or a lot of, again, haze. You can bump that up and it will add more contrast to it, or it will take the contrast out and actually add more haze. So you can see how it reduces contrast, and it actually feels like the haze is getting a bit thicker, right? It does not, of course, substitute, like you don't get Z depth like atmosphere in there. That will not happen, but it can emphasize and it can push it a little bit if it's already present in your image. So that's a very, very cool thing. And then you have like the usual like vibrance and saturation sliders, you know, out of Photoshop. But use these with, be very careful to use these. Now, we have this. We also have a tone curve where you can adjust that one. I don't personally use that one. Feel free to use it. I think it's again a thing where like, okay, well, some people like to use levels, some people like to use the curves, same kind of stuff here. I don't use the color slider at all. What I do use is something called split toning, which is very cool. So you have two controls for, actually three controls. You have the controls for highlights and for shadows. And then you have a balance that adjusts the cutoff between these two. So what we can do is we can choose a hue that we want to use for the highlights, which right now nothing happens, of course. So let's choose like, we have like a very, let's choose like the yellowish color for the highlights. And then if we bump up the saturation, you will suddenly now see that our highlights are becoming greenish. Of course, because they're blue right now, if we're mixing in yellow, it becomes green. We can mix a bit of red into it so it becomes purple, or we can push the blue. And you see how with the saturation we can mix that in here, or we take it out completely. So you can push that in whatever direction you want. We can also push now the shadows in, I don't know if you want to add a bit of yellow tint to the shadows. So you now see once we bump up the saturation slider, we're getting a yellowish tint into the image. Or basically you can see here the color that it mixes with the existing one. And now we have the slider and we can basically tell it where this mixing of the highlights starts and stops, and where the shadows start, or the other way around. If you push it up, you see that more green is being mixed into the scene, and if you push it down, we can see that more red is being pushed into the scene. So you have very, very fine control, and you can adjust, make great adjustments here to the overall, to the feel of the image. So you can do that on a highlight and shadow basis, and then, like I said before, you can bring in temperature changes based on the overall image. So between these tools, I think you can achieve very, very cool results. Here's some more detail sharpening tools. I usually stick to mostly the texture and clarity, but of course here you can dial things in even more. You got to be careful. At some point there will be like a lot of noise introduced. There's also noise reduction, of course, which will get rid of a lot of the detail, which makes the image very soft again. There are some lens correction controls, so you can, for example, introduce distortion, which can be very cool to give a bit of a warping and kind of get rid of the straight lines you get from 3D. The vignetting, you can make it even dark. You can make it darker, or you can make it brighter. So to combat vignetting, you can make it brighter. So I'll usually introduce a little bit like vignetting, a little bit, not too much. You can of course transform your image, but that is more applicable to photos. There's some effects, post-crop vignetting, different kind of vignetting. There's a couple of, you have more control over the vignetting here. This is more like the lens correction vignetting to combat that, or you can turn this off and just use post-crop vignetting here. It's kind of like a post effect. Make it darker, make it brighter. The roundness you can influence. You can, the feather, how soft the fall off is. All these kind of things you can do. You can even add grain, which is very, very cool, I think. So that's something you do not need to do in Photoshop anymore with like an overlay. You can just add the grain here. You can even change the size of the grain, make it like, I don't know, 16mm film or 35. You You see even how in the bottom here we have these fireflies or whatever from the render, but if you introduce grain, it actually disappears. So that's a very useful feature. But of course, the overall image will get a bit softer again. So you need to, the roughness is kind of like how almost like how contrasty the grain will be. So having like a subtle grain overlay is really, really helpful. And calibration I never use. Again, more fine color controls. I think in the beginning it's better to focus on a few tools that will allow you to experiment with these effects. So once you have this image done, of course you're like, okay, do I have to do this whole thing now again with this one? Well, actually you don't. So you see here in the bottom that there's this little icon, and it says develop adjustments applied to this image. So what you can do now is you right click on this image, for example, and you can say develop settings, paste settings from previous. And now we have the exact same settings applied to this image. Now, it might not be 100% working for this image because it's a bit different. It has some slightly different colors, different highlights, but at least we have already a starting point, and now we can dial in certain aspects of the image to say like, okay, I want this to be a bit cooler, or like there's too much red in there, so I want to, it's too saturated, right? So you can make slight adjustments. You can also say you want to develop settings, you want to copy settings, and then it will ask you which settings to copy, but we'll just copy all of them. And then you can, with shift click, select all of these and say develop settings, paste settings. And now all the images will have all these settings applied. So you don't need to go through one by one. I mean, you should still go through it one by one, like, because this one is way too red. This doesn't even match the look of this one, even though we have the same settings applied. So we need to dial things down and prepare it like it looks like it's out of one series. This one, maybe I want to push a bit more the blue in here, and you will see. So once you're done with everything, I select everything. All the images, again, with like click, hold shift, click, and you have everything selected. And then you can go to file and say export, or you just press command shift E, control shift E. And now you can select where you want your photo be saved. You can say the file settings, color space, quality, how it's supposed to be named. You can resize it automatically, everything that you want to have applied to this. And then you just say same folder as original, you export it, and then it will be exported. Yeah, and that's all I have for Lightroom right now. One thing to say, that there is nothing for you to save here, it's automatically saved. So you can just close Lightroom and that's it. And you have these, you can even take these develop settings and apply these to completely different images from a different collection, which is also very handy. So yeah, that's it now. That's it for now for Photoshop, for Lightroom, excuse me. And I'll quickly jump back to Photoshop and wrap this up. Here's the image that we saved out. And so if you see, I just brought the image from Lightroom in. If you just turn it on or off, you see the difference, right? I mean, this image I think is not bad by any means. It's just different. It is a bit soft, I think, now that you look at it. Of course, when you, like I worked at 4K resolution. If you shrink it down to 2K, it's gonna get some sharpening. But I think this is an interesting alternative. You can see the purplish hue in the foreground, in the dark areas. And I made it a bit more steely blue in the background. So, and overall, of course, it's sharper, it's clearer, right? I mean, you can see the artifacts because I'm just pushing, like, I worked in 8-bit and I'm pushing around JPEGs. Of course, it's going to fall apart at some point. But you can work in 16-bit, you can work with TIFF files to exchange. That will help, I think, mitigating all these effects a bit. And but at the end here, I'm applying another my usual stack of post-processing, color lookup tables and level adjustments. The same as I usually do, some vignetting and grain. I mean, again, I showed you how you can do these in Lightroom itself, so you do not need to have these as extra layers. You can get rid of those. But I just wanted to see what kind of effect my usual layer stack has on top of the image in Lightroom. And I quite like the effect. So you see it's kind of like doing the same thing again, but I had the stack of these images already. So I thought, why not try and see what it does? And I like the outcome, so who cares if I did the same thing twice. Yeah, that is basically the last step I did to get the images to where they are. And then save those out, and then we're done. So I hope this was useful, and thank you for supporting this, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.